everyone, welcome to day 10 of my 12 Days of Interactive December Dailies video series. Today I'm sharing a process video for how I created this magic iris template to make an interactive page in my 10x8 December daily album, and this page is documenting the day I spent wrapping presents. I came across some of these magic iris cards on Instagram and knew I wanted to try recreating this in my December daily with the wrapping paper that I used this year. So I spent a bit of time figuring out how to create these templates so that I could have one that would be large enough for my 10x8 page. And after some trial and error, I did figure out how to make these templates, and I'll have a link down in the description box below for the two different triangle templates I created. But I thought I'd also share my process video for how I created these templates, just in case you want to try creating your own templates with different shapes. And if you're not really interested in how the template was created, I'll put a timestamp below as well so that you can skip this next part. So to create any of the magic iris templates, first off, you'll need an equilateral shape. So that's a shape where all the sides are the same length. So like an equilateral triangle or a square or a pentagon, etc. Next, you'll need a program where you can rotate that shape at specific angles. So as much as I like to try to use Microsoft Word to do all of my digital scrapbooking things, it doesn't really have a reliable way to specify the angle of rotation. So I'm going to use Canva instead, because on the desktop version, it does have an indication of the angle you're rotating your objects at. And it also has the added benefit of having shapes that are locked in proportion. So that means that I don't have to worry about accidentally making my individual triangles too fat or too tall when I'm enlarging them and resizing them. And also Canva is free, so I figured accessibility-wise, it's probably as easy to access as Microsoft Word is. And lastly, you'll need a consistent angle that you'll be rotating your shape at. So through trial and error, I found it works best to rotate at an angle that's divisible in 90. So like 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 18 degrees, 15 degrees, and 10 degrees are all possibilities. Now, if you pick a degree of rotation that is too large, you'll find that your shapes are going to get smaller and smaller quite quickly, so you might only end up being able to do like 3 rotations before your shape is way too small to rotate. However, if you pick a degree of rotation that is too small, your shapes are going to take a longer time to get smaller, so you'll end up having a lot more intricate layers, but you might end up with like 15 rotations before you get to the middle section. And to illustrate this point, here are the two triangle templates that I created. The one to the left was rotated at 15 degrees, and the one to the right was rotated at 18 degrees. So notice that the one on the left, which has the smaller degree of rotation, has more layers of triangles before it gets too small to rotate anymore. And which degree of rotation you pick will just depend on your personal preference, as well as maybe like the type of paper that you're using. So for example, if you have a paper that has very large patterns like wrapping paper, for example, you might want to go with the larger angle of rotation because it will show off more of the pattern paper at a time. Whereas if you're just using a solid paper that has no patterns that you need to be able to see, you might want to go with the smaller angle of rotation because you're going to get a lot more of the interest from the added layers of paper. So now that we know more about how these templates work, let's try making a template. I'm going into my Canva account. This is just the free version that I'm using here, and I'm starting off by creating a 12x12 canvas to give me lots of space to work with. Next, I'm inserting a triangle shape, which I can find by going into the Elements section, and you can either go in the Lines and Shapes section, or you can just type in triangle in the search bar and one will pop up. And I'm just going to make this large enough to fill up my whole page. Next, I'm going to insert another triangle, and let's just make this a contrasting color so that it's clear to see. I'm going to click and drag to rotate the shape by 18 degrees, which was my angle of rotation of choice. And you can do this either clockwise or clockwise. It really doesn't matter just as long as you're consistent for the whole process, but your resulting piece is going to have the shape rotating the opposite way you choose to rotate your template shape. And next, I'm just shrinking my triangle so that it's just touching the large triangle on all 3 corners. And it does take some fiddling around to get this perfectly positioned, but once you're done making this template, you'll have that to use for as many times as you like. So I'm going to repeat this process and keep rotating my triangles by 18 degrees each time, so there is a bit of math involved. And as your triangles get smaller, feel free to zoom in to the screen on the bottom right corner to make sure everything is nice and lined up in there. And at a certain point, your triangles are going to get so small that you wouldn't really be able to fit much else in there. So at that point, I'm going to zoom back out and download this image onto my computer and import it into Microsoft Word. And you can resize this and print it out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper like I am doing here, or you can feel free to print this template out at a smaller scale if you're going to be working on smaller projects. And don't worry, the templates that I'm uploading for you guys have been recolored to grayscale so that you don't have to use up as much ink printing out all these dark colors. Now that I have my template, I'm going to use the digital tree stamp from the Ali Edwards Holiday Icons stamp set to cut out a tree-shaped window on some white cardstock. And I did make sure that it's centered on the white cardstock because I am going to make a pocket out of that later on. And I had enlarged the digital stamp to about 4 inches wide by 6 inches tall. Now, if you don't have a digital cutting machine, the tree stamp or any window shapes that you're going to be using with these types of templates should be relatively simple enough that you can just enlarge it and print it out to fussy cut out the inside part. Because I'm going to be making this into a pocket, I'm going to make the score marks before I do anything else. So this piece of white cardstock measures 7.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and I'm going to score it on the 7.5 inch side at 1/2 inch and 7 inches, then scoring at the 8.5 inch side at 1/2 inch. And I'm just applying some score tape onto the front of my window in between the score marks and the edges of the paper on all 3 sides as well. Next, I'm taking my window and flipping it over so that the front of my window is facing down on the template. And I'm going to make sure that the smallest triangle on the template is centered in my tree window. Once that's centered, I'm just adhering that down with my washi tape just temporarily onto the template. And now comes the fun part of filling in my tree. So the idea is to line your paper up against each of the lines created by the triangles in the template and work your way from the outermost lines around the triangle and working your way inwards. And you can do this in one of 2 ways. Either you can start with one pattern paper and go all the way around once, and then switch to another pattern paper and go all the way around with that one, and then switch to your last pattern and go all the way around, etc. Or you can do what I'm doing here and alternate between all 3 patterns so that each corner ends up being filled with one pattern. And the important thing to note is that while you're working your way around the template, make sure you're finishing the outermost layer before moving on to the next layer. So like, for example, I covered up all of the outer dark gray areas first, and then I moved to the mid-toned gray areas, then to the white, then to the dark gray, etc. And that's easy to do when you're looking at the template just by itself, but when you are looking through your window at the template, it might not be as obvious, so just make sure you're being careful with that. You'll notice that as I'm laying these strips of wrapping paper down, I am folding them in half first and using that folded edge as the edge that's going to be showing through the window. And that's just because the wrapping paper is quite thin, and when I cut that out with my paper trimmer, there's a bit of fuzziness at the edge where the trimmer is tearing through the paper, and folding the paper is just one way to create a sharp line and give more stability to the piece. If you're using pattern paper that's a bit thicker, like the pattern papers in the December Daily collection, feel free to use just the strips of paper by themselves without having to fold them in half first. You'll also notice that I'm just using normal stationery tape to adhere these down into place. I just found it easier to do that than to use my usual roller tape adhesive. So now that I'm left with the last tiny triangle, it's time for the big reveal, and I think it turned out really cool. To fill in that small last triangle, I was looking for a gold glitter paper so that it would stand out a bit from the gold foil that I have in my wrapping paper. And I decided to use one of these large gold glitter stars for the top of my tree. These are from the December Daily Advent Calendar. And I just couldn't find any gold glitter paper in my stash that had the same gold hue as these gold stars, so I'm going to have to sacrifice another one of these stars just on the back of this page here to fill in that center triangle as well. Another option, if you are making this piece into a pocket, is to leave a larger triangle portion in the center uncovered, and that way you can get a peek of whatever you put inside the pocket. I also picked out this black pattern paper from the December Daily collection to go behind this pocket. I thought the black provided a nice contrast to the colors I have in my wrapping paper. And to make this into an actual pocket, first I'm going to cut off the bottom two corners where the score lines intersect, so that when I fold these hinges down, it reduces the bulk in those two corners. And because I'm going to be putting things in and out of this pocket, I don't want my inserts to get caught on any of these loose edges of the wrapping paper on the back of my panel, so I'm going to tape over this entire section with some clear sticker paper. And that just gives a nice backing for my inserts to slide smoothly in and out of the pocket, and it also helps adhere down all of those loose edges that might be hanging loose there. For my insert into this pocket, I'm using one of the pocket cards that came from the December Daily main kit. This one says making a list. And because my insert is only 4 inches tall and my pocket is a lot deeper than that, I'm going to make a stopper about 4 inches down from the top of the pocket so that my insert won't fall all the way down to the bottom and be like irretrievable. And to do that, I'm just cutting a strip of paper at 1 inch wide by 6 inches and folding that in half to create a bit more bulk and adhering that inside my pocket just where I want my pocket card to stop sliding down. And I am going to staple some ribbon to the top of that pocket card later on to make it a bit easier to take out of that pocket as well. I'll also be adding some journaling to the back. It's just going to be a list of the Christmas gifts that I got everyone this year, so I didn't really want to show that in this video. Just attaching that pocket down onto my base page. And to finish off this left part of my spread, I played around with some embellishments for a while before deciding to fill this space up with one of the large Wreath transparencies and some Pleather hearts from the December Daily main kit, along with my usual wood veneer number and a plastic heart. I just love how the different greens in the Pleather and the plastic hearts, as well as in the transparency wreath, really accent the greens in the wrapping paper nicely. And that's about it for this interactive page. I'm super pleased with how it turned out, and it doesn't even have that much bulk in it, which is the best part because this album is absolutely full. As mentioned before, I'll have a link to this triangle template down in the description box below, so feel free to use that for any of your projects, and be sure to tag me on Instagram if you decide to give it a try. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for more December Daily process videos coming up before the end of January. Thanks so much for watching.